Here at British Focus, we bring you the truth behind the headlines, exposing the scandals that politicians would rather keep hidden. If you're tired of being misled and want to stay informed about the real state of politics in Britain, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive into today's shocking revelation. Pensioners branded as terrorists. Veterans mocked and ridiculed. Labour ministers caught in private conversations saying things they would never dare utter in public. You won't believe the disgraceful comments coming from Keir Starmer's inner circle. The WhatsApp scandal rocking the Labour Party right now is exposing a side of Starmer's team that they desperately hoped would never see the light of day. And let me tell you, it's not pretty. One of the most shocking revelations involves Andrew Gwynn, the former Shadow Health Secretary. That's right, former. Because after reading the vile, callous messages he sent, you'll understand why he's no longer in that position. This is a man who was supposed to serve the public, to represent ordinary working people. Yet, when an elderly constituent reached out to complain about the state of bin collections in his area, Gwynn's response: he hoped the man would die. Yes, you heard that right. A sitting Labour MP, someone who was elected to serve the people, wishing death on one of his own constituents simply for having the audacity to complain about local services. But that's not all. Gwynn also joked about another constituent getting hit by a truck. Who does that? Who in their right mind thinks it's acceptable to mock the people who put them in power? This isn't just cruel, it's completely unacceptable. And Gwynn is not the only one caught up in this disgraceful scandal. Oliver Ryan, another Labour MP, was also active in the WhatsApp group, but his contribution was just as sickening. Instead of standing up for dignity and respect, Ryan was busy mocking people for their sexuality. This is coming from a party that constantly preaches about inclusion and progressivism. But what kind of progressive politician ridicules people based on their personal identity? The hypocrisy is off the charts. Of course, now that the messages have leaked, Keir Starmer is scrambling to distance himself from the mess. He's hoping the public will forget about it, that it will all just blow over. But let's be real, these are not low-level staffers or random party members. These are his top people. The very people he chose to represent Labour, to shape policy, to be the public face of his party. If this is how his closest allies behave in private, what does it say about the culture of the Labour Party as a whole? For years, Labour has tried to shake off its reputation as the nasty party. They tell us they're all about kindness, compassion, and standing up for the little guy. But these messages paint a very different picture. Instead of being the party of the people, Labour is showing itself to be a party of elitist, power-hungry politicians who look down on the very people they are supposed to represent. And it gets worse. Because these messages weren't meant to be public. This is how they really talk when they think no one is listening. Which begs the question, what else are they saying behind closed doors? What other nasty little secrets are they hiding? As my grandfather used to say, give a man enough rope and he'll hang himself. And right now, Labour is doing an excellent job of tying the noose around its own neck. They've been handed power, they've been given the trust of voters, and instead of treating it with the respect it deserves, they are spitting on the very people who put them there. And here's the part that really boils my blood. These MPs aren't just making random offensive comments. They're insulting, mocking, and wishing harm upon their own constituents. The very people who trusted them, who voted for them, who relied on them to stand up for their interests. This isn't just an insult, it's a betrayal of the worst kind. And let's be very clear, Keir Starmer is complicit in this mess. He wants to pretend he had nothing to do with it. But these are his MPs. His team. His responsibility. And the fact that he hasn't immediately condemned them and taken serious action speaks volumes. This is the same Keir Starmer who has spent years trying to present himself as the reasonable, respectable alternative to the Tories. The man who claims he will bring moral leadership and integrity back into British politics. But tell me this, how can he possibly claim the moral high ground when his own MPs are caught red-handed, behaving in the most vile, cruel, and reprehensible way imaginable? And yet, where is the outrage from Labour supporters? Where is the accountability? They are quick to condemn scandals in other parties, but when it happens within their own ranks, suddenly it's silence. Suddenly, it's swept under the rug. The truth is, Labour has been getting away with this for far too long. They preach morality but practice arrogance. They demand accountability from others, but refuse to hold their own members accountable. And it's about time the British public sees them for what they really are. Because make no mistake, this is just the tip of the iceberg. If these messages were never meant to be public, imagine what else is being said in private meetings, in backroom discussions, in the corridors of Westminster. And here's what we need to ask ourselves. Is this the kind of party we want running the country? Is this the kind of leadership we deserve? Politicians who laugh at their voters, who mock their struggles, who wish them harm when they complain about basic public services. Labour can try to spin this all they want. They can make excuses, fire a few scapegoats, and pretend this is an isolated incident. But the reality is, this is who they are. This is what happens behind closed doors. And if this is the true face of Labour, then Britain needs to wake up. We cannot let them get away with this. We cannot let them walk into power unchecked. The British people deserve better. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you believe Labour can be trusted after this? Do you think Keir Starmer is fit to lead? If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to British Focus, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, we can hold them accountable. Together, we can fight for the truth. Keir Starmer has managed to anger yet another group of voters, and this time, they're not the kind to sit back and take it. These are farmers. They have tractors, and they know how to use them. And believe me, they're not happy. The Labour leader has set his sights on inheritance tax, and in doing so, he's declared war on the countryside. His proposal? To make it harder for farmers to pass their land down to their children. Now, for those who don't quite grasp the gravity of this, let's put it in perspective. Farming isn't just a job, it's a way of life. A farm isn't just a business, it's a family legacy, passed down through generations. But under Starmer's new tax plan, that legacy is under threat. If a farmer dies, his or her children may have to sell off parts of the farm just to cover the tax bill. That's not just unfair, it's a betrayal of everything Labour claims to stand for. How exactly does Starmer justify this? Well, in his usual smug, detached manner, he claims that Britain can't afford to keep giving farmers tax breaks. According to him, we must choose between lower mortgage rates, economic growth, reduced NHS waiting lists, or supporting farmers. That's right, he's framing it as if helping farmers is somehow hurting everyone else. What absolute nonsense. Let's be clear, this is not about economic necessity, it's about ideology. This is about punishing a group of people Labour sees as inconvenient. And that group happens to be the very people who put food on our tables. The reality is, this tax increase will bring in at most £500 million. That's a drop in the ocean when it comes to public spending. It's barely enough to scratch the surface of the NHS's financial crisis. So if this tax hike won't solve the UK's problems, what's the point? Simple. Starmer wants to make a statement. He wants to signal to his base that he's cracking down on the privileged, except the people he's targeting aren't privileged at all. They're hard-working families who dedicate their lives to feeding the nation. And do you think farmers are just going to sit back and take this? Not a chance. They've taken to the streets, or rather, the fields and the motorways, with a level of fury we haven't seen in years. Tractors blocking roads, convoys bringing city traffic to a standstill, mass protests in the very heart of London. If Starmer thought farmers would be an easy target, he has gravely miscalculated. And what does Labour do in response? They run. Starmer had a visit planned to a housing development in Buckinghamshire, but he cancelled it. Why? Because the farmers were waiting for him. The leader of the Labour Party, the man who claims to be strong, principled, and ready to govern, literally ran away from a group of farmers. Let that sink in. Is this really the leader who's going to take on the challenges of running a country? A man who buckles under pressure the moment real people push back against his policies? If he can't even face a crowd of furious but peaceful farmers, how on earth will he stand up to foreign leaders, economic crises, or national emergencies? The most insulting part of all of this is the arrogance Labour is showing in assuming they can afford to lose the rural vote. They think farmers don't matter, that their communities are too small to make a difference in a general election. As if supermarkets will just magically keep filling themselves with food. As if Britain's agricultural industry isn't a crucial part of the economy. But here's what Labour doesn't understand. Farmers have long memories. They don't forget betrayal. They don't shrug their shoulders and move on. They remember who stood with them and who threw them under the bus. And right now, Keir Starmer's name is mud in the countryside. What's most damning about this entire debacle is what it reveals about Starmer's leadership. A real leader would work with farmers, not against them. A real leader would understand that food security, rural economy, and farming communities are worth protecting, not undermining. A real leader would find ways to support Britain's farmers rather than treating them like an obstacle. But Keir Starmer? He's proving that he's willing to sacrifice an entire sector just to score political points. He's showing that he's more interested in pandering to certain voter groups than in governing responsibly. He's willing to divide the country rather than bring it together. And let's not forget the sheer hypocrisy at play here. This is the same Labour Party that claims to stand for working-class Britain. The same Labour Party that promises to look out for those who keep the country running. But what do they do when it comes to actual, hard-working families in agriculture? They punish them. They tax them into oblivion. They force them to sell off their land, just to line the government's pockets with a few extra pounds that won't even make a dent in public spending. And what about the bigger picture? If farms start getting sold off piece by piece, what happens next? Do foreign investors swoop in and buy up British farmland? Do supermarket giants take control of more and more of the food chain? Do we become even more reliant on imported food, driving up prices and reducing our self-sufficiency as a nation? These are serious questions, ones that Starmer and his team clearly haven't thought through. Or maybe they have, and they just don't care. Farmers aren't the kind of voters Starmer is interested in courting. Labour sees them as expendable. They're not the ones marching for woke social causes in London. They're not the ones buying into Labour's endless identity politics. And they're certainly not the ones Labour's inner circle rubs shoulders with in their cosy metropolitan circles. And that, right there, is the real issue. Labour has become a party of elites, for elites. A party that pretends to care about the working class but only when it suits them. They'll champion workers' rights in theory, but when it comes to actual working people, like farmers, they're the first to throw them under the bus. So, let's ask ourselves, is this really the kind of leadership Britain needs? A leader who caves under pressure? A party that punishes those who put food on our tables? A government that divides instead of unites? Britain deserves better. Our farmers deserve better. And if Labour thinks they can walk into power without a fight from those they betrayed, they're in for a very, very rude awakening. If you thought Starmer's war on farmers was bad, wait until you hear about the great millionaire exodus. Because while the Labour Party has spent years trying to convince the public that they are the party of economic competence, their policies are now sending Britain's wealthiest supporters packing. And let's be clear, this isn't just about the super-rich fleeing for tax havens. This is about Labour alienating the very people who have funded their ambitions for years. The numbers are damning. According to a recent survey, confidence among high-net-worth individuals in Labour has plummeted from 84% to a disastrous 48%. That's not just a decline, that's a full-scale collapse. Think about that for a moment. Just a short while ago, Labour had massive support from the wealthiest individuals in Britain. People who were ready to believe that Starmer's party had changed, that they could be trusted to run the economy without the disastrous policies of the Corbyn years. But now, they're jumping ship faster than Starmer himself when faced with an angry farmer's tractor. And why? Because Rachel Reeves, Labour's shadow chancellor, has been cooking up some economic plans that are about as popular as cold tea on a winter's morning. She's talking about increasing employer national insurance contributions, slapping a 20% VAT on private school fees, and rolling back tax advantages that Britain's wealthiest residents have relied on. Now, you might say, well, it's about time the rich paid their fair share. But let's be honest here, this isn't about fairness, it's about recklessness. Labour isn't just targeting oligarchs hoarding wealth in offshore accounts. They're punishing the very people who create jobs, invest in businesses, and, yes, bankroll the Labour Party itself. And now, the domino effect is starting. 1 in 10 of these wealthy Labour supporters is actively considering leaving the UK altogether. Not just moving their money, moving themselves. Taking their businesses, their investment portfolios, their philanthropic contributions, and heading for the exit. Imagine the sheer scale of this disaster. Labour relied on these individuals to fund their campaigns, to back their economic plans, to promote stability in the markets. And now, these same individuals are looking at Starmer's leadership and saying, "We're out." The worst part? Labour didn't see it coming. They thought they could milk the wealthy for cash while still keeping their loyalty. They assumed that because the rich had supported them in the past, they would simply grit their teeth and accept the new tax burdens without question. But that is not how the real world works. People with the means to relocate their wealth will always do so if they feel the government is about to punish them for their success. And now, Labour is panicking. Starmer and Reeves are backtracking so fast it's almost comical. Remember all that tough talk about clamping down on non-dom tax loopholes? Yeah, that's gone. Suddenly, Rachel Reeves is listening to concerns and assuring high-net-worth individuals that their voices will be heard. What happened to all that principled leadership? What happened to standing firm on policy? Turns out, money talks, and when it starts walking out of the country, Starmer listens. This is exactly the problem with Starmer's leadership. He has no backbone, no real convictions, no clear economic vision. He's trying to be everything to everyone, and in doing so, he's ending up as nothing to anyone. Think about it. Labour first alienates farmers, now they're driving out investors and entrepreneurs, and before long, they'll turn on middle-class families who realize that their taxes are next in line. This isn't just bad politics. This is economic suicide. And let's not forget, this isn't just about policy failures. This is about betrayal. These wealthy backers didn't just support Labour for fun. Many of them genuinely believed Starmer when he promised economic competence. They trusted him to be a responsible leader, someone who wouldn't take Britain down the path of reckless spending and overtaxation. And now, they feel duped. But can we really be surprised? This is the same Keir Starmer who promised in his leadership campaign to uphold Corbyn-era policies, only to abandon them the moment he took charge. The same Starmer who assured the public that he wouldn't increase taxes on working people, yet is now lining up stealth taxes left, right, and centre. The same Starmer who talks about economic growth, yet is now actively discouraging investment in Britain. The ship is sinking, and with each new misstep, more and more people are heading for the lifeboats. The real danger here isn't just that Labour is losing the rich. The real danger is that this exodus is a symptom of a deeper, structural problem within Starmer's party. Labour doesn't seem to understand how economies work. They think they can keep punishing success, keep raising taxes, and somehow still expect Britain to remain a desirable place to invest and do business. But economies don't work that way. Investors, job creators, and high earners will not stick around to be squeezed dry. They'll move to Switzerland, Singapore, Dubai, anywhere that actually respects wealth creation. And when they go, what happens next? Well, let's look at the track record. Whenever Labour tightens its grip on the economy, Britain suffers. We've seen it before. High taxes, low growth, economic stagnation, capital flight. And who pays the price? Not the politicians. Not Starmer, who will still be living comfortably on his taxpayer-funded salary. No, it's the ordinary British public who suffer. The ones left picking up the pieces when investment dries up, when jobs start disappearing, when inflation spirals out of control. Labour loves to talk about fairness, but what's fair about driving away the very people who contribute the most to our economy? What's fair about choking business growth? What's fair about telling hard-working Britons that their only option is to pay more and more tax while getting less and less in return? This is not the party of responsible governance. This is not the party of economic growth. This is a party blundering from one crisis to the next, losing the support of every key sector, and alienating the very people who once believed in them. Starmer can scramble to do damage control all he wants, but the message is already loud and clear: Labour cannot be trusted with the economy. And when the next election comes, voters won't forget that.